Our gospel reading for this morning comes from the 13th chapter of Mark. As we move into a new Christian year, we shift from Matthew's gospel to Mark's gospel as the primary gospel for the readings on Sunday. And as is always the case on the first Sunday of Advent, we hear not of Jesus' impending birth, but of the day that his return entails. In the reading for this morning in Mark, Jesus has been speaking for some time about that day, about what it will be like. He has warned against listening to those who say, "There's the Messiah." And we pick up in the middle of the reading with the 24th verse. Listen for what God is speaking to us through these words. "But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away." And the word generation here can also mean a people or a race. "This generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey, when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at the cockcrow, or at dawn. Or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
When I was a little boy, I'm not sure there was anything more exciting in my life than the arrival of Christmas. Way back then, Sears still mailed out these big Christmas catalogs to go with their regular catalog. But this big Christmas catalog would come, and when it arrived, my brother Ron and I would grab it and begin leafing through it, looking at all the things we might want for Christmas. I think that for us, the arrival of that catalog signaled the real beginning of the Christmas season, a much more important marker to us than decorations in the stores or Christmas music on the radio. And we went through that catalog over and over, dreaming of all the wonderful things in there that we might get for Christmas. And then we sort of whittled it down to things that we thought might be more reasonable to actually ask for. And then we waited. And finally, after what seemed like forever, the house would be decorated, the tree was ready, and the presents were wrapped and under it, and finally Christmas Eve would arrive. Now, my family was one of those nothing can be open till Christmas morning households. And so that meant that the evening of Christmas Eve was probably the time of greatest expectation and anticipation I knew throughout the year. Before bedtime, my father would read the night before Christmas, along with Luke's nativity story, and then we would go to bed. We would go to bed, but we didn't go to sleep. Ron was just a year younger than me, and we shared a bedroom. And how could we possibly go to sleep knowing what was about to happen? Somehow, in the living room, those things we wanted, those toys we asked for, were going to miraculously appear. And the fact that we shared a bedroom meant that we reinforced and amplified one another's excitement and anticipation. Every sound we heard, every creak, might be reindeer on the roof or Santa coming down the chimney. And my parents would have to come into the room several times going, "You need to get quiet and go to sleep if you want Santa to come." But it was so hard. It was so hard to settle down, so hard to go to sleep. Now, I still enjoy Christmas Eve, but it doesn't carry quite the same level of excitement and anticipation it did all those years ago, and so I generally have no trouble going to sleep. But on other times, when I'm very excited about something, when I'm worried or anxious, when I'm anticipating some big event, I may still have trouble getting to sleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. So Jesus says to us this morning. Quite the opposite of what my parents would say to me on Christmas Eve, go to sleep. Jesus encourages his followers to stay awake. If my parents had come in the bedroom and said, keep awake, we'd have never gone to sleep on Christmas Eve. So clearly, Jesus is dealing with a very different problem. Now, this I think is lost on modern Christians. But back in Jesus' day, Jews expected that when God's Messiah finally arrived, that it would usher in a new age, a new era. Something so wonderful, it would be like Christmas morning every day. The prophets of the Old Testament speak of it, a day when people will beat their swords into plowshares, when the wolf will live with the lamb, when the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion and a fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. But things had not happened quite as people had expected. Jesus had come, he had lived, he had died, he had been raised again, and the world still looked the same. Those very first Christians assumed that this was just a brief delay, a small window in which they could share the good news with the world, but that window would close the moment Jesus came back. And if you read, for example, the letters of Paul in the New Testament, it's clear that Paul expected Jesus' return to happen during his lifetime. But in our gospel reading for today, Jesus warns against such assumptions. No one knows the day or the hour. The final closing of the age and the coming of the new one are known only to God. When they finally arrive, it will be obvious to everyone. It will be as clear as the arrival of spring. But in the meantime, we are simply to stay alert, to keep awake. But while staying awake when you're giddy with excitement is easy, it is another matter when you don't know when the thing you're awaiting will actually arrive. And when one day looks like the next, and the next, and the next, waiting becomes more and more difficult. And I suppose that's why some Christians are forever ignoring what Jesus said and trying to figure out the timetable of his return. The spectacular failure of Harold Camping earlier this year is but the latest in a long string of failed predictions. Camping's prediction, at least the one from back in May, generated the kind of anticipation and excitement among his followers that Christmas Eve did for my brother Ron and me. People quit jobs. They gave away or sold property and houses in anticipation of that promised rapture that Camping said was arriving. But just as Jesus said, it didn't happen. Such predictions are inevitably wrong, for no one knows the day or the hour. Today, another Advent season opens. and the anticipation of another Christmas begins. As with Harold Camping's predictions, we know the exact timing and date of the arrival of Christmas. We have lots to do to get ready. We may struggle to get it all done, but Christmas will not catch us off guard. We will be ready when it arrives. And perhaps that's why Advent over the years has become almost entirely about getting ready for Christmas. After all, how are we supposed to get ready for something we don't quite know what it looks like, that we don't fully understand, and whose hour of arrival is unknown? I actually think that the question grapples with some fundamental issues about the nature of faith. Think about that for a second. What is faith? What does it mean when we say we have faith? Now, I think that the fact that Protestant Christianity grew up alongside the Enlightenment and the scientific age probably has contributed to a notion among Protestants that faith is largely about information. And our Protestant focus on faith rather than works sometimes seems to have created a new sort of work. The work of believing the right things, knowing the correct information. But as worked up as people can get about right beliefs, as hard as some work to convince others of their beliefs, it seems to me that more and more people are becoming disenchanted with this notion of faith as knowing and believing the right information. Rather than wanting to know what they must believe, people are asking, what difference does faith make in how I live my life? What difference does it make in how I experience life? And while Advent that just gets ready for another Christmas may get all the facts right about what once happened long ago, I'm not sure such of an Advent has a lot to say to those who wonder what difference any of this is supposed to make. Most all of us are familiar with Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. But where did that dream come from? In the case of Dr. King, his dream emerged from a deep life of faith and prayer. And faith for Dr. King was not simply a matter of believing the right things. Rather, it was a deep connection to God and to the promises of God that looked forward to something new and something wonderful. You can have all the information and not dream the dream. The dream is a transforming hope that is known and felt, often despite evidence to the contrary. It drives people to live and act in ways that anticipate the dream's fulfillment. To be wide awake with anticipation, even though the day and the hour are unknown. In the very last speech that he gave, just one day before his assassination, Dr. King said, "I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man." That's Advent faith. That's wide awake faith that lives expectantly for a day with no announced arrival. You could memorize the Bible and know every theological doctrine that Presbyterians hold dear and be no closer to such a faith. Such faith comes only when Jesus abides within us. When the Holy Spirit transforms us and we begin to become so connected to God that God's hopes and dreams for a new day start to become ours. It's Advent once more. We light Advent candles and we get ready for Christmas like we do every year. Some of us have done it so many times we could do it in our sleep. But Jesus says, keep awake. Come and dwell with us, Jesus. Let us see the promised land of your new day, that we may get ready for it, that we may work for it, that we may anticipate its coming like excited children on Christmas Eve. Come, Lord Jesus.